and welcome to Channel 105 News. I'm Jamie Madison.
And I'm Alexander Hamilton. Our top story tonight brings us to a very controversial court case that is headed to the Supreme Court.
Bubba Cletus Jr. is going to Supreme Court to argue the unconstitutionality of the Obamacare health care reform. He says that, among other things, his Ninth Amendment rights have been violated.
What exactly is the Ninth Amendment? I went inside a local college campus to find out.
Okay, so how do you feel about Obamacare?
I agree with the general premise that we should, as a country, provide a service or a good to those who can't afford it or can't have access to it. But I disagree with, I guess, how it was implemented. There were portions of it that they didn't necessarily have a majority or a vote cast. It was kind of pushed through Congress. In fact, Nancy Pelosi actually said that the bill should be passed so that the details could be figured out later on. And I think the purpose of the debate is to figure out what these details are before, something's enacted, and it could be all good for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
But if there's negative effects, what good does it do to figure out the consequences later on?
Right.
I also, I know when it went through the Supreme Court that they said everyone was talking about the tax involved, or whether or not it would be constitutional because you're requiring individuals to purchase a good, that's mandated by the federal government. And that was actually the premise that, having people purchase healthcare insurance. I guess his argument behind that was that, individuals who, say, smoke, you're a smoker, and you don't contribute to healthcare, in the long run, when you're older and the years of smoking have caught up, there's a higher cost for you as an individual on the healthcare system, and that's a drain on the system.
Mm-hmm.
So because of your irresponsibility, and these aren't necessarily my words or his,
Mm-hmm.
because of irresponsibility, it'll have a negative effect to the nation as a whole.
Right, cost everyone more or whatever.
Right. So they should be required to have some sort of contribution along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But what actually happened when it went through the Supreme Court was that is actually unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to require in the wording that it was a tax.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know. I don't agree with it.
Okay, great.
How do you feel about Obamacare?
I feel like it's a topic that not a lot of people know about. I think it should be more displayed out to the public, that we need more information about it. I mean, I agree with Obamacare. I believe that every child and every other person deserves to have medical insurance, as well as, not just the people who are disabled or who can't, or children, but it should be available to everyone.
Okay. Do you feel that Obamacare violates your Ninth Amendment rights?
I couldn't actually tell you that information. I'm not aware of it.
How do you feel about Obamacare?
Obamacare?
Oh,
we doing something with government? Oh, you did say government.
Listen to Obamacare. Okay, I got half. I have half. Okay, do you think that Obamacare would violate your Ninth Amendment rights?
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I thought we were
No, it's okay. That's fine. It's okay.
Oh, it is?
Do you know what your Ninth Amendment rights are?
No.
Our first guest this afternoon, you may have seen him on the news lately, is Mr. Bubba Cletus Jr. Welcome, Bubba. I understand that you are refusing to adhere to the rules set in place by the Obama health care reform.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Why is that?
Well, I'd say there's a lot of reasons.
Can you give me one that stands out?
Well, I'd say above everything else, my Ninth Amendment rights are being violated.
How so?
Well, if you read information about the Ninth Amendment, you will find that it was put into place to protect the people from being run by the big government. It should protect us from having to buy health care.
But doesn't the government have the right to tax its people?
Yes, that's how they can get away with this crap. Abuse of power, if you ask me.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Junior.
Well, thank you very much.
Nice
ma'am.
to meet you.
You too.
When we return from our break, we are going to be talking to an attorney about what the Ninth Amendment really is about. Welcome back. Here to join us on the show now is Stella Lou Money. Stella, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing great.
That's good.
So you are here to talk to us about the Ninth Amendment and what it really means. So what does it mean?
Well, by definition, the Ninth Amendment addresses the rights of the people not specifically listed in the Constitution. There has been speculation since the adoption of the Ninth Amendment whether it covers every action a person does or whether the interpretation should be more limited.
Okay. I understand that when the Constitution was being drafted, there were Federalist and Anti-Federalist viewpoints on the Ninth Amendment. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, according to Federalist Paper Article Number 84, Anti-Federalist Alexander Hamilton believed a minute detail of particular rights is certainly far less applicable to a constitution like that under consideration, which is merely intended to regulate the general political interests of the nation, than to a constitution which has the regulation of every species of a personnel and private concerns. And on the contrary, Federalists like James Madison said, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state government are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all of the objects which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives and liberties and properties of the people, in the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state.
Thank you, Stella. That was very interesting.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad I can help you.
Okay, it was nice to meet you.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
This is not the only Supreme Court case in which the Ninth Amendment has been a factor.
In the 1942 case of Wickard v. Filburn, Roscoe Filburn, a farmer, was growing wheat for personal use, not to sell. The U.S. government established a limit based on the acres of farmland to raise prices on wheat during the Great Depression. Filburn, having grown too much wheat, was ordered to destroy his crops and pay a fine. The Supreme Court justified this ruling under the Commerce Clause for interstate trade. As he was not buying feed and other goods, he was hurting the economy. Some say this violates the Ninth Amendment because Filburn, in hard economic times, had the right to be self-sustaining. Some people, like Mr. Cletus Jr., feel the same way about Obama's health care reform. They say this violates the Ninth Amendment because people should have the right to take care of their own health, not have the government regulate what they're doing, just like Filburn.
All right, well, not specifically being familiar with the Ninth Amendment, I would first start off and say that, I don't want the government to step into my life and mandate me to pay a tax or a fee regarding health care. If I choose to live irresponsibility, that's a decision I make on my own. Like the story I shared with you earlier, I broke my collarbone, and I had to find external sources to help me to get through that and have surgery. I think at a certain point they become, if you give them a little, they'll take a lot. When the law for seatbelts was passed, when they first passed the law, they said this will never be a ticketable offense. We're just passing this law to enforce safety of our citizens. And now you see seatbelt stops. You're hiring extra police officers, and it's jamming up traffic, and they're looking at every individual to see if they're wearing their seatbelt. If you're not, you get fined. And, that's completely different, but somewhat the same. You give them a little, they take a lot. who's to say that because now the government has a hand in healthcare, well, you don't exercise enough, you're not eating enough broccoli. You have to make a ridiculous point to show the holes in the situation. If something like that does come down further along the line, where because now I'm a part of this government healthcare, if I'm not taking care of myself, again, I'm going to have a greater drain on the overall good of everything. So if I'm not doing what it takes to be what they deem a healthy individual, then I have to pay that cost. How will I pay that cost? If I don't do these things, is my tax going to go up? I don't know as if there's anything in place to prevent that from happening. It's all kind of on the good faith of the government, because they're doing this act out of the kindness of their hearts to provide health care for everyone. That is just going to be, they're going to play by the rules, and that's not necessarily true. And I could be wrong. It could come out in the end, and I could be wrong. That's fine. The other thing, when it said something about disparaging the rights of individuals in the Ninth Amendment, I know there's a lot of talk about the so-called panel that will determine what procedures will be done on an individual, because this government is now running this instead of the private sector. At a certain point, it is about cost effectiveness. So, when you're an old person and you're breaking bones and you have dementia, and they're going to outweigh someone's life based on the financial obligation. So, if it costs X amount of dollars to...
So knowing what the brief information has told you about Obamacare and the Ninth Amendment, do you think that Obamacare does violate your Ninth Amendment rights, or...
It does to an extent, but the thing is that I feel like it's choosing for the greater good of the community rather than just a personal level. I feel like it's with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's safety, then there's food, then there's shelter and emotional needs. And there comes a point where you have to do the greater good for everybody, and it's making that choice, in which I know it's a hard choice to make for especially the Obama administration as well as the people, whether they want to stay private sector insurance companies rather than having widespread, everyone's being taxed, but everyone's having the same health care. But it is a difficult situation, but I believe it's choosing the better of two.
Since its creation, the Ninth Amendment has been a topic of debate among Federalists and anti-Federalists, Republicans and Democrats, as well as the government and its people. It's up to you to decide how you can protect your Ninth Amendment rights. For more information, visit your local library or a government teacher.